And there we go.
Perfect. So welcome everyone. This is our second picture book study. Um, the book that I chose this week is a little bit more recent. So last month we did The Gruffalo, which is from 1999. This book is from 2020, and it is written and illustrated by Alex Willen. So the objective of this study is to discuss the writing and illustrative elements of Unicorns Are the Worst, to see a modern take on picture books and an excellent example of show don't tell. And then brainstorm and discuss collectively how to include these elements into our own work. So I'm going to do a live reading. So I don't think everyone's read it, so I'll get started. For hundreds of years, I have gone about completing my important goblin business in peace, from documenting spells to gathering ingredients for spells to alphabetizing the ingredients I gathered for spells. No distractions, no interruptions, just me and my work. But guess who decided to move into the meadow next door? Unicorns! Now, I know what you're going to say. Unicorns are the best. Unicorns are magical. Blah, blah, blah. Well, that's true, but a lot of things are magical. Elves and fairies, and what's the other one? Elves, fairies, and, oh, right, goblins. I have studied the forgotten magic that lies deep within the earth. I know spells, so I can transform socks into slugs. I can turn broccoli into ice cream. And I have mastered the three-strand braid. But despite all of this, does anyone ever ask to have a goblin-themed birthday party? Meanwhile, all unicorns do is frolic around all day on their dainty unicorn hooves. Frolicking isn't even hard. Goblins can frolic. We just choose not to. I don't get it. They are just horses with pointy heads. I have pointy ears, but you don't hear me carrying on about it. And the glitter! So much glitter! Do you realize how hard it is to get glitter out of a smock? They are constantly playing their instruments. Newsflash, unicorns, not everyone likes harp music. And the tea parties. So many tea parties. Not like me, one of their tea parties, that I would have time for tea parties when there is all this important work to be done. It's not like the shrub is going. So, do I enjoy a cup of tea? Perhaps the occasional crumpet? No, because someone around takes their work seriously. You know what? I wouldn't go to one of their studies, even if they did ask me more. You know why? Because unicorns are the worst. I would rather be neighbors with gnomes, or this dragon, or a chicken, or wait a minute. Dragon, run for your life! Yourselves, my little sock slugs. Gulp. Well, I guess unicorns do have some good traits. For instance, did you know that their glitter can put out dragon fire? And that harp music can be quite disorienting. Those dainty hooves pack quite a wallop, and it turns out a unicorn's horn is more than just pointy. All right, fine. As far as neighbors go, unicorns aren't that bad. But I think that we can all agree dragons are the worst. All right, so I know Margaret's read it. Annie, was that new for you?
That was brand new for me. And it was adorable, of course. I like how he changed his tune.
Mm-hmm.
Knew it was gonna come. I knew glitter was gonna get in there somewhere.
Of course. Kim, did you have a chance to read it, or was this your first time? First time.
First
Awesome.
time.
Good. So I think for the studies, I'll keep like having a reading, whether it's me or YouTube. I think it's good. So I wanted to guess some of the specs. As I mentioned, it's released in 2020, September 29th, so it's just under 4 years old. What do we think the target age range is for the book?
5.
Okay.
Oh, that's not a range. I just threw in a number.
So you
It
think
was
that,
a good
yeah,
number.
there's a range, but you think 5 is a good sweet spot? I do too.
Yeah.
All right. Page count. Did this feel like about 32, a little bit longer? Early elementary? Yeah, Kim, I think so too. So, okay, what about word count? Did it feel lengthy? Did it feel shorter?
It went quick, so it felt short.
I read really fast. And then do we have a guess on the, I threw the publisher in there. Do we have a guess? It fell short, it can be. Well, just for fun, I did add the publisher. Looks like the target age range, according to the publisher, is 4 to 8. I thought the 8 was interesting. It's usually 7. So 5 there. The page count is 40. That includes the end pages. Word count, I counted around 450, but that was me like quickly counting. And then there's Simon and Schuster, which might be why they were willing to lengthen the page.
I can't
So
believe they got that much story in just 450 words. I can't do that.
I think you can, and we'll a little bit. So this I would call a standalone with series potential, like when it was first published, right? It was a complete story, like in and of itself. But as you can see here, they've released 4 books in the series, and there's a 5th one coming. What elements do we think made this book a good candidate for a multi-book series?
Easily repeatable, like the same pattern could easily be overlaid onto different, well, villains.
Absolutely. There's the catchphrase, like blank are the worst was very strong in there. The guy was like, also putting a little grumpy guy into a variety of situations is good. There's a lot of opportunity to change what's happening, but still have kind of the same arc with what he set up here.
Can I take a moment, Michelle, and just let everybody know, if you want to leave your cameras off, totally get it. But if you wanted to leave your camera off but put your mic on, then you can join in the conversation when your mouth is empty or when you're not yelling at somebody cutting you off, then you can go ahead and join in the conversation as well. Because I know typing is really going to be hard for y'all.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If mine off, it means I'm coughing. I've been coughing.
Okay, Marty.
So I'm going to turn it off when I do that.
Thank you very much. So why do you think publishers really like standalone books, regardless of the age category, that have a series potential? So why do you think that that's something they find appealing?
I think it's because if it does not live up to its expectations, then there's their hand's not forced to continue on.
Exactly. So it's not like it. I know, like in what's it called? Chapter books. A lot of those are shorter, and so they like the series. But in chapter books, it's good to have that flexibility. And if you're thinking of a pitch like, "Oh, I have a multi-book series," they may feel a little like about that. But if you say, "I have a standalone with series potential," then it's kind of the wheels get turning a little bit.
Now, I believe the same holds true, though, for middle grade and young adult. I mean, they still need to know that if the sales bomb, it can be a closed door.
Correct. Okay, so I don't know, is anyone here an illustrator? Kim? I'll still go over this.
Kim says no, she's not.
Okay, perfect. So I went through and counted. This book actually has 11 full spreads, which is a lot. To put it into perspective, the Gruffalo only had 2 full spreads in the whole book. This book has like fewer spot illustrations, and I put the like but how, and I think it's because, and I'll get to it later, how he draws some of the backgrounds. He's able to save some time. There are 2 pages that are reserved for the copyright and the dedication. That's actually on 1 page, and I'll get to that in a bit. Does anyone have a guess what medium they used here? So as I was reading it, it's probably because I draw. I was like, I think he used Procreate, which is on the iPad, and I looked it up, and it is. So he drew this with a tablet, which is pretty cool. We're getting into more and more illustrators using an iPad with that program instead of using Photoshop, which you can never own. So, all right.
Which you can never what?
Own. Photoshop, you can't own Photoshop. You have to pay a subscription service.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I see what you mean.
Procreate is a iPad in the Apple store, and it's $13, and you own it just outright for $13. Meanwhile, the drawing program Photoshop, you're paying more than that per month to never own it. So Procreate pays for itself pretty quickly.
No, when you said that though, in my brain, I was like, what? They don't own their own illustrations just because
No,
they use,
sorry.
yeah, my brain went a whole different direction.
Right. So there's some other, like there's a drawing program called Clip Studio Paint. You can pay for that and then you own it until they make a new version with updates years later. But I'll get into some of the illustration interesting elements. So I mentioned the dedication. As you can see here at the top, you have the copyright information, and below, as he's sweeping, there's the dedication in the sweeping. It's in this area. You'll see on the bottom left. I thought that was cute. So one of the things I noticed that he does is he has white space in unusual places. Like as he's running away for the dragon, and I did crop it a little bit. He did not draw the pathway. That's just white with a little shadow in a couple places. And there's not a white space in this book, so I think that's something they did. I don't know if it's to save on printing costs or just to make it easier on the eyes, but that happens a couple times. There's the orange page. It does not fit the, I thought it was interesting. It doesn't fit the palette of the rest of the book, but I was just thinking maybe it's supposed to represent his smock or something. Not sure. And then I don't have a picture here, but the sock slugs are on different pages even when they're not mentioned. So that's something I think that's fun for kids, is the parents can be like, let's read it again and try to count the sock slugs. And then backgrounds kind of, so this is an example here. He's in his library, but it's just gray with some lines to represent the books. So that's a way to save time in it. It's also good visually because if he had drawn that stack of books and the books behind it, I think it would have been messy and it would have been kind of hard to get a good feel for it. This is another page that doesn't kind of has a background, but not. It's just a color with texture and those other lines on there. This is how I think he did some of the high number of spreads, was by having more like textures and colors on some of them. And then I put it on here, considerations like to butt or not to butt. I think y'all noticed when he was watching his smock. There's another book called, I don't remember what it's called, but it's got a frog and there's like a butt on the back. And there was this big thing on the internet where people were offended and doing like reviews. And I wanted to talk about like, it's okay and you can successfully have that in there, but I think any more than one of those is probably passing the line, crossing the line. But this is a major publisher and they were willing to publish. I don't know if it was okay because he's a goblin and not like a child. That's probably how they were able to get away with that. The other book I saw, it was actually a frog and you could see like from behind like his butt. So for me, like to butt or not to butt, it's like if it's a non-human character, it's a little bit more acceptable, but you know, you have to really make sure that it's worth the joke and worth like offending a few people over. All right. So page count, 40 pages is long. How do you think the publisher justified this being 40 pages instead of 32? Like, why was that okay?
Was the author someone who had already successfully published a picture book?
A couple of picture books. Y'all said the book felt short. Can you imagine if they had tried to slice out like 8 pages, how, you know, how bad the pacing would have felt? So in this case, and he kind of does a lot of like chattering, like, well, this and that, and he's being grumpy. And I think if they had trimmed it down to 32, it would have been it would have been like just too much talking. And so this book is actually a self-ended book. Do we all know what that's referring to, like self-ended and colored ended?
Not really.
Okay, so what self-ended is in that 40 pages.
Oh, but I just counted the pages and there were only really 32. I didn't count 40 unless you're including the cover. That'd make it 30.
You count these in there too.
I don't know. It still didn't seem like 40 though.
So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 34, 36, 38, and 40.
Oh,
So the way
all right.
40
Is it easier to count the signatures than the pages and then just figure how many pages are in each signature?
Well, it kind of depends. So have you ever seen a picture book that the pages that are glued down are a plain color? That's a colored page, and that's a way to get the to not use your precious pages to glue down into the cardboard.
Mhm.
So this one is a self-ended book because it's using the white paper that has printing on it versus a colored page, which is using just a plain colored in there. So if you're worried about whether you're doing self-ended or color-ended and you're hitting that word count, there is an option to do color-ended just to make it a little more comfortable. So why it's printed in a series of 8 is because of how, and you can look this up online, 16, it's the way they fold it. And so 32, you don't have leftover paper. They're able to take this huge sheet of paper and fold it up and cut it and you're good, or fold it up. So to do 40, it's actually more expensive because it's like offset printing kind of.
Yeah, because normally a signature is 16 pages, right?
Right. Mhm.
And so there's 2 signatures per picture book, but this one would have been 2 plus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so there must have been some sort of determination that to shorten it would have made the pacing of the book off. And perhaps this is because it's a bigger publisher, Simon & Schuster, they were able to print in a higher quantity. So if you're wanting to get published with a smaller publishing house, doing 40 pages, unless it's like a nonfiction, might be a little bit tricky. So staying with the 32 is really the safest bet. Okay. So I want to talk about show don't tell. I know that's a huge thing. We talked about it last month. So I wanted to think about what kind of story do picture books tell? Like not the type of stories like it's about a dog or a cat, but in terms of storytelling, I kind of compare it to a campfire, right? So a campfire, every word you say is the complete story. You have to describe the visuals and you have to do all in one as a storyteller. Picture books tell a different kind of story because there's 2 mediums. There's the words on the page and then there's the pictures, and they both play a different part. So keeping that in mind, why are the pictures important in a picture book?
Would it have to do with the age of the audience needing assistance when they reread it themselves?
Part of that is it also allows the reader to come to conclusions. Because the reason you don't want to tell and you want to show is I think will rob the reader or the child or the reader a chance to come to conclusions. And I'll give an example in a little bit. I've got pictures, examples from the book. So the way I think of it is this ain't a campfire, right? We don't need to say in the text everything that's happening on the page. If there's no reason to have pictures other than for it to be pretty. But the pictures are a part of the storytelling process. And the best books and the most like successful books, I think, are the ones that there are little things happening that aren't mentioned in the words. All right. I wanted to talk about why we think this book works as it does. Like, what are the strengths of this book? Margaret?
It's just cute and it's a fun story. I don't know how to explain why.
So you think the humor in it was really strong?
Yeah, I think it's funny.
As you were reading it, were you able to kind of hear the goblin's voice? I know I didn't really do it. I'm not an actor, but were you able to kind of imagine like what he would sound like in your head?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I thought so too. So I thought the strength was a good balance of the voice and then showing things well and then the humorous telling. And I wanted to mess up the book. So we're going to ruin the book. So I wanted to take this page and that middle part that says, do you realize how hard it is to get glitter out of a swamp? That is really good telling, or sorry, that's good text. And let's change it to, I have to wash my smock at least twice a day. Doesn't that feel less effective?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
when you say, I do you know how hard it is to get glitter out of a smock? Nothing about that page said anything about washing. So the child hears that, and then the child sees him with the hose, and a child comes to the conclusion, oh, he's washing it. If we say, I have to wash it twice a day, we give the child of the opportunity to come to the conclusion with the context clues.
Also, it renders that image useless now. Now I'm looking at it
And
with
it's just
that
a funny
context.
but.
I'm like, well, redundant.
It's redundant, and it's like, okay, I have to wash it. But it's like, do you know how hard it is to get it out? Like, oh, okay. And we say that too. Like, that's also how we talk. And so I'll later hear someone say, you know how to get it out of there? They're like, oh, they're talking about washing. Okay. Age. So meanwhile, all unicorns do is around all day on their dainty unicorn hooves. Frolicking isn't even that hard. Goblins frolic and choose not to. Okay. The unicorns jump around the yard giggling, and I am so annoyed. It is hard to mow when they are jumping over my head. So I think that's less effective. And it doesn't really tell us anything about the unicorns, and it tells us what the unicorns are doing. It doesn't tell us anything about the unicorns. When you say, oh, they frolic all day, we can't learn that based on the picture here. And they're not going to draw something to, it puts the illustrator in a weird position where now they need to show it, like with the nighttime and daytime. And I think it works better before too, because about him, hey, I can have fun, I choose not to. So he's capable of frolicking. He's just like, I just don't want it. And so it's a character moment. And then I think this is the last one. So this is the end of the book. Dragons are the worst. Let's ruin it. We love having tea parties now that we are friends, and we all agree dragons are the worst. So we've taken away the opportunity for the child to figure out, oh, they're buddies now. Oh, they're having a tea party because I see the teacups. And so you're taking away opportunities for connection, for the child to connect concepts and to figure things out on their own. And to me, that's the difference between, like, you know, showing and telling. So, but it's okay to tell sometimes, right? For example, I'll bring up this example again. All unicorns do is frolic all day. That's also an opportunity for the child to learn a new word. Okay, they're jumping, so frolicking, you know, on their dainty unicorn hooves. So he is telling there, but it's okay because he's adding to what is happening in the picture.
He's also
and a good
overstatement. Sorry, he's also overstating because we know they do more than just frolic all day. So
exactly.
He's sympathizing. Sorry, Margaret, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say a good example of what you were just talking about is the page where it says a unicorn's horn is more than just pointy. And it shows them they must have all hit the dragon with their horn. It doesn't say, but it just shows it.
Exactly. So I think sometimes we think of pictures adding to the words, but I think with picture books, the words add to the pictures. And because children will pull up a book and just look at it, and I would hope, like as an illustrator, that children are able to piece together most of the story just based on the pictures. So to me, like, the author still comes up with the story, that's still very important, but the words are to help support the pictures that are there, not vice versa. Okay, and on this one, because at the beginning of the book it says, do you know who moved in next door? And then it says unicorns. Okay, well, he's telling, we can see that it's unicorns, but it's okay to tell here because he's a little grumpy guy in the back, and he's yelling so loud that his yelling is almost as big as his little house. And it's funny, and it sets up the joke later where he yells unicorns are the worst. So it's okay to tell sometimes. I think you just have to be very intentional how you do it and make sure it adds to the story. And then I think this is the last one. They're telling here, do you know their glitter can put out dragon fire? They don't even show the fire. If he hadn't have done the telling here, it would have taken several pages, I think, to illustrate this battle. And so the way he's done it has helped condense in a really visually appealing way. Okay. And kind of towards the end, and then we'll get into like specific things here. So what do we think, like, what can we learn from this book and away from this book?
That glitter is hard to clean up.
Yeah,
That's what I'm walking away. No, actually, I don't know what I'm walking away from this book, but what I am walking away from this whole conversation is like something like you kind of already know, and yet you just don't get it. Like you have to hear it just in such a way. And I think that's really got me to see, especially when you said, how can we make this worse? That really helped me see how we really don't want to say everything that's on the page. That was brilliant.
Because again, I think it's like it's robbing the child of an opportunity, a learning opportunity, and that connection in it. Whenever children make connections between things, like I don't know, like when if you're ever watching a movie and you figure something out, that feels good. You get a little like a little rush of dopamine, and we don't want to steal their baby dopamine from making connections. Um, for me on this too, I took a lot away like with illustrations. I feel like he broke some rules. He changed the colors. That page about goblins was a completely different style. I feel like he broke some different rules, but it works like cohesively. Um, and a lot of times you hear, "Oh, don't do animal characters." Don't and the character needs to be the same age as a child. This guy looks like he's probably hundreds of years old, but it works. And so it's a non-human character. He's not an animal who appears to be of an adult age, but it works due to the illustration, making him like kind of child sized. And so it I think it's okay to break some like given rules, right? And it's also like I have a friend and I've read this book to her child like a lot over the last couple of years, and she likes to repeat it. And so, like, the unicorns are the worst, dragons are the worst. Also, having themes in there, or like vocal kind of repetition that they can latch onto. Um, Having pauses. Do y'all remember that page where the spread at the like party city, and it's just a bunch of unicorn stuff?
Mm-hmm.
The child comes to the conclusion, I don't see any goblin stuff there. But if you said, there's no goblin stuff here, weakens the impact of the illustration. And so I guess I learned from this, trust your readers. And the readers they're intelligent, they're learning, but they're smart. And I think show don't tell is one of the most difficult things for writers. And it's like, okay, well, how do we do this? And we talked about this last month, Annie, like where it's okay to imagine out what's on the page, and you could write it on a post-it note and put on this page she is going up the hill and she is angry and she is this, and then pretend that's your illustration even though it's words, and then go to the top and add to it. And that's okay to do. I would rather someone do that and then remove the post-it than to write something where they're just telling everything that's happened in the text. And it makes it more dynamic. Have y'all heard that word count for people who are authors / illustrators is much lower typically? Yes. And this is kind of how, is because it pairs together a little bit better, and I think there's less of an inclination to tell in the text whenever you know what you're going to be drawing. But that doesn't mean someone who's writing can't use a post-it to make those kind of notes for themselves. Like you don't have to receive.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I think that's brilliant. Actually, that's a very good tip, is to put that post-it up there. Because when you were saying before, the writer isn't, how did you say it about the writer isn't putting out the story, the writer is adding, the writer's not adding to the illustrations, no.
The illustrations aren't adding to the text.
That.
The illustrations, I know I'll offend the writers here, but the illustrations are probably 70 to 80% of the story.
Yes.
And then the words are embellishment.
When you said that, it struck me as so very true. But then I thought, should we be doing this backwards? Like, should the illustrators like do all the illustrations and then we come up with the words? But that little post-it helps put us back into place. It helps us say, okay, so this is what it would be illustrated. I don't need to say all those things.
Right, exactly. And some people are fine not doing that, but if it's someone who struggles with that, don't write it down and say, okay, this is like what is happening in the story, okay, and then what do I think will be on the page? And it's fine if you don't have a great imagination, you know what they're doing. right? You know the actions and the steps in the story, and then come up top, because it could be something as simple as like I thought of something like someone finds a dog and it's like I'm adopting this dog and I'm taking them home versus you'll be safe with me. The impact of that is just a lot more poignant, and with the illustrations the child is able to see, okay, they took them home and they're taking care of them.
Yeah.
Let's see, Kim, I know your camera is off. What did you think? I know this is kind of a little divisive of a book because it's silly and it's like, oh, he just, he doesn't like people and they save him and then he likes them. And I'm like, yeah. You like the book?
Oh, she says she liked the book. Yeah.
Do you
I don't
struggle
think,
with showing and telling?
she says I do. Yeah.
You overtell? That's
Don't
fine.
we all?
Overtell on a post-it.
Mm-hmm.
Intentionally overtell on the post-it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, to me, tell the minimum you can and like leave a lot up to the illustrations. Because the parents also like that too. The
Mm-hmm.
parents are tired, they're exhausted, and they don't want to pick up a 700, 800, 900 book if they can help it. They're going for that short one that's repetitive that the kid likes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Not
Kim,
to
I
say,
also agree. That post-it idea is, I think it really does make a big difference in your word count and how much time you're wasting for the reader.
yeah, and then it's not bad. It's not a bad thing. You're writing the story, you're creating a world. So don't try to end something that is usable, and you just use it as a tool, and then the top, and then write what you want be more appropriate for a picture book. Because if you're writing out everything, you might as well be writing a chapter book or an early reader, right? That's whenever you're overtelling, it's like less age appropriate. And with that, you can play around with words if you're not overtelling. Frolic, that's not a 4-year-old word. But with such good illustrations, they'll be like, oh, that's frolicking. And so you can have fun with the word choices that you have. And you can't do that in early level readers. You cannot do that. That's very strict vocabulary requirements because a child is reading on their own. Presumably, most children will have this read to them. So you can play around and make things up like the Gruffalo. And so there's still ways to play with your words without overtelling. I saw Maria came in. Are you still
Mhm.
here, Maria? I think she was here last month as well. She popped out. Did y'all want to discuss like any of the other elements from this book or anything? Because I think we're only at 6:40, so we've got some more time. So did y'all want to discuss maybe a specific project of yours where you're struggling with showing and telling?
Maria says she has no microphone. She's on the struggle bus. That's hard. I'm so sorry, Maria.
Yeah, that was me earlier. I had to go grab a webcam just to plug in because my microphone was being weird.
It's
Maria,
really hard not to have a microphone when you're the host.
oh, definitely. So Maria, we're talking about show don't tell, and I was asking anyone if they have if they wanted to. Okay, no worries. If they wanted to discuss maybe a manuscript or something where they struggled with kind of with that concept.
I even do that with middle grade because that's my, like I said earlier, that's my field is middle grade and
Mhm.
young adult. And even then, we always have the tendency to try and just say what happened rather than just show it through reactions or through behaviors. That's always going to be an issue for every genre, every age.
I think the more that you can also trust your reader and the more that you find joy and giving them those moments to feel successful in making
Mhm.
connections. It's looking for, I think, opportunities where they can make those connections, and being really excited for them in the future when that time comes might make it easier. Because if you're looking at it as, oh, I'm telling and that's a bad thing, versus I'm so excited to show, that way they can figure.
You froze just a little bit. Just a little bit. While you're freezing, while you're freezing, I'm going to take this moment to say, and I don't know that this applies to picture books, so you guys tell me if you can see how it could, but in older books, they say there's a balance. You can't only show because you will exhaust the pages. It takes more page work to show. But you can't also only tell because you will bore the reader. So you find that balance, and they say you want to do more telling in the slow moments and more showing during the action when things are like really moving. Okay, she had to click out and come back in. We'll let her back in as soon as she comes in, because look, we lost the back screen too. And hold on. No, I'm coughing, Margaret. You're contagious.
I totally agree with what you just said, though. Yeah. Like summarize the parts that aren't the exciting, interesting parts, and then show the other parts.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is. I mean, you definitely want to show. Hold on, let me see where we are here. That makes sense about more telling in the slow moments. Yeah, you definitely want to show so that the reader feels like they are in the moment. That's the whole point, is that they're in the moment. But it eats up a lot more page. Yeah. All right, we got our host back. Whew, that was close. I thought I was going to have to talk forever. I was going to run out of things real quick. Yay! Mic off. Everybody enjoy your short intermission. Okay, we're still not catching you. I'm sorry. I don't want to tell you people what she said. I'm a lip reader, and no, just kidding. Well, she was telling Maria earlier that she had no working mic, so she had to use an external. And here we are with absolute proof of this.
I switched.
So Maria's back, and I want to let her know that she missed absolutely nothing because we lost Michelle. Our host got dropped. It froze and dropped her, and she just now got reconnected. So
Okay, I'm using my phone and my laptop is being a booger. Okay, fantastic.
I was driving and my phone only has the audio, so I'm so sorry.
Okay. So this is being recorded, even me freezing probably in really unpleasant expressions. We were talking about this book, and one of the things that came up was show don't tell. That's one of the biggest things we've talked about. And I was asking anyone who struggled with that before if they wanted to, we're to the discussion portion now. If anyone wanted to talk about like a story they're working on or a story they tabled, because that's a topic that they were struggling with. Yes.
I do, because I thought I wrote a story and I minimized, more of the of the show rather than the telly. And I don't think I got across right. So where the person who read it said, well, it's missing something. Well, it was missing the pictures, but if you're not an like you picture it, like the example with the dog that you said. Well, to the person who's reading the manuscript, they're going to want to know all those details. So how do you get that across when you're presenting, your manuscript? Because it's like, okay, if the picture was there, you could really see what I was talking about. Does that make
So
sense?
it's tricky. Who I feel like a publisher or an editor would be able to read the manuscript and be fine. If you're struggling to get a peer to read it who's not as used to that, why not make a picture book dummy and then you can just write on a post-it what's happening on the page. If you really want to workshop it down. I mean, I've never seen anyone do that, but that might work. Because if you feel like I've got something here and I don't want to add unnecessary words, then that might be something to attempt is the picture book dummy. And then write out like on a separate colored post-it or note card, like what the illustration would show.
Or as our last speaker, Mel Rosenberg said, and by the way, we should go ahead and plug his little picture book dummy thing if we can figure out. I'd have to go back in time and find that. But anyways, just plug that because that might be helpful resource
That
for
would
this
be.
group. But anyways, he said, you could do the words just like she said, or you can just do stick figures. But either way, you're just conveying the idea, and that way we don't have to repeat what we are going to see on the page with more words. So I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to go searching.
Thank you. So whenever someone is an author and illustrator, they're thinking in pictures, but there's also words attached to what they're thinking, like when they're sketching out. So I don't see anything wrong with doing that, because if you look at some of the best books, they're not going to make any sense. This book wouldn't really make a lot of sense without the pictures. And so there is a struggle. How do you get your manuscript like publishing ready, but you get stuck in the critique stages because people are like, I have no idea what's going on. But if you add so many like illustrator notes, then it's like, what is happening? And so hopefully the resource that Annie will be sending will be something you can do in addition. And then seeing if you have anybody in your chapter who is like really, oh, cool.
Yes. So I put it in the link, but anybody who's watching the recording after, because I think the majority of people who registered will be watching the recording after the fact. It is at ourbooks.com, and that is OURBOOX, not K. He got cute with it. So BOOK, ourbooks.com. And then, basically it's /books/create a free page flipping book dummy in 2 minutes. But I bet if you go to ourbooks.com, you will from there be able to find the channel to it. So that's a good way also, like Mel Rosenberg said, it helps you find your pacing. But in this case, it also lets you know if you can just scribble that out there and make a dummy for your critique partners who are not visualizing as a publisher or agent would.
Right. And it doesn't mean that someone, because if you take some of the best picture books that exist, remove the pictures. I mean, I might be a little bold here and say, if your manuscript makes 100% sense without the pictures, something's probably not okay.
Because you're leaving nothing for the illustrator. Yeah.
Right. And so it's because I don't know if Maria was here when I was talking and said that to me, the words on the page are an embellishment to the pictures, not vice versa. And when you do less telling, it gives the illustrator like more room to show, and they'll come up with ideas that the author would never have thought of. And that kids will, that's how you get I think the repeat, like reading and catching different things in the story. But it's like getting to the point where you can get published. So I think there is a growing pain stage where it begins to not make sense to critique partners, but an agent would probably, or an editor would make sense of it. Did anyone else want to talk about like any specific projects, because that's something we did, we were able to get a little bit more into, and we had a long discussion about rhyme. But I know that this kind of topic is a little less concrete, and but it's something you always hear about people struggling with. Annie, you talked about a story that you said you had a table. You want to
Yeah.
talk about it a little bit?
It was way too long because I did exactly what you're telling me not to do. I basically said everything the characters were doing.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I still
So
think there's nothing wrong with that, except when that is a manuscript. Like,
yeah,
I
you
think
could
that's a good
totally
start.
read. Yeah, you could totally read the manuscript without the need for the illustrations. And that right there, you're right. It should have been my first clue.
Well, but that sounds like you made a timeline, which I think is fine. It's just, so
Mhm.
you've written a series of events, and now it's time
Right.
to get those series of events into picture book form. So
Right.
you wrote a campfire story, because that's
Yay.
what it is. When you understand everything without the pictures, it's a campfire story, because you've included enough visual elements in your text that it's completely passable as a campfire story. That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want you to, when are you going to rewrite it?
Oh, okay. Here's another problem. Because it's in verse, like I'm like, well,
Oh,
once I take this
no.
out, it no longer works. So like I naysay myself so much. But again, since I focus so hard on middle grade right now, and then always in the back of my mind, I'm on the next YA book I'll never write. I'm like, yeah, it's not been my focus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
But it's
I
good to know
think
why I messed it up so badly.
I wouldn't say you messed up. You're just in an earlier stage of the story.
Yeah. True. Very positive. So Maria says, I wrote a story, but I didn't want to add what they were watching, but the main critique was to tell what they were watching.
Does that make sense? I'm trying to type fast.
Is it on
Oh
a
no,
TV?
speak up. Use your voice.
Well, it was I was writing, I titled it Sarita Hears the News, and it dealt with a child watching like bad news. Like, well, it could have been a war, it could have been
Right.
shooting. I just didn't want to be too specific because of the age and how they react to it, and then how parents react to it, like
Mhm.
hush it away, and then my point was that parents do need to talk about it, and I did it in a very light way. But one of the things that the agent said was, well, what are they watching? Because if it's a war, we're not in a wartime. Well, I didn't want to put a war, you know what I mean? And I
I
didn't put anything exactly what they were watching, so that
I
it
would
could
also
go to the
support your
time. But
I would
I
support your choice to not say, because that way it applies if a child had
Mhm.
just watched, like, a kid get kidnapped, or if he watched like a war, or if he watched people fighting about the presidential debate, whatever is traumatizing to them at the moment, this whole lesson still applies. If you try and narrow it down to this one thing, yeah, you're targeting your audience better, but you're also eliminating so many people who could benefit from that lesson. My only If I were the agent, my question would be, is this a story for the child, or is it a story for the parent?
mm.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Well, I made it friendly enough for a child. In
Right.
other words, they relates to a balloon that pops and they think, oh, wait, is that what happened at our home? Because of the sounds that they heard. And at the end, of course, the resolve is they're safe, they all hug, and
Mhm.
happily ever after kind of deal. But it was the parent relating, oh, I'm sorry, I should explain this, that bad things happen, but we're safe here at home.
Mhm.
That
Okay.
kind of, instead of saying, oh, it's not for children to worry about, because that's what, but
Right.
that was the main critique, was that I didn't put what it was, and I didn't, could have been a shooting, it could have been, I didn't want to be specific, but maybe
Right.
I tabled it and I got to go back and rewrite it, and
That would
maybe,
be up to the illustrator, to me, what they want to show. Because that
yeah,
might be something that the illustrators would allude to. And that would need to be a conversation with the editor and maybe the publishing house, like how far they want to go, and give directions to the illustrator, like as to what is appropriate, especially with their catalog of books they already have. So
Yeah.
that may not be up to you. And even if it were up to you, you wouldn't say it with your words, it would be shown in the images anyway.
Okay.
So I think
Yeah.
you're okay, but I mean, it being the popping sound, I think that implies like some sort of like gunfire. And so it might be good for you to consider to narrow it down a little bit to know how the parents would talk to the child, you know?
Mhm.
Because
I also
if it's
feel like you're touching on PTSD a little bit, and that might also be another selling point. If that is your target audience, is children who are now suffering
Mhm.
from post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah.
And yeah, and I think that's what I was gonna do is rewrite it, focus more on like a balloon, kind of that feeling of what happens. So that PTSD of it. You're correct. Because I did put, the sounds blared like siren, and just rather than what the picture, I was focusing on the sounds of what they were listening to and how it rang inside them like a fizzing bottle that wanted to pop because of their reactions. But okay. But I see
perhaps you could
that's why I'm having trouble with the show, the tell. It's like, oh, you have too much of this or too much of that or less of this. So yeah.
I think you could have maybe make a list of things it could be, like have a list and write it to where it would fit any of these scenarios, because it's important. And maybe they're asking about, is it war? Because if it is war, is it in their country? How are they going to show where it's at? Those are a lot of big questions. And so, do you have something where the mom says like, that's happened far away, you're safe at home?
That's right. Yeah.
Like, 'cause if you have it in there, then it doesn't necessarily matter what they saw, as long as it's something violent. But if you have a list of possibilities, then if the agent asks that, say, I wrote it in a way where the illustrator, editor, publishing house, they can decide what they want to show. Because I know you guys have a whole lot of considerations you make when you publish.
Can I say something? First of all, I wanted to say something about her story, and then I wanted to move on and say either we continue the conversation and I stop recording, or we move on to your next topic of discussion. But you think about that for a second. And Maria, I was thinking, and this is just a thought, of course, this is your story, but what if this was an ongoing event where the child sees this and now is terrified and the parents blow it off and they see a different news thing and they're terrified. So this is an ongoing moment, maybe. It's just a thought, but what do you say? Do you have more topics of discussion?
At this point, so the way we handled it last month is that the discussion kind of went where the people who were attending wanted to go. So I think this would be a good time so we can cut it off. And then if we still have technically 30 minutes and then figure out where we want to naturally let things ease off. But yeah, if you want to stop recording, I think this should be.
All right.
Thank you for offering.
Any last words? I know if Kay were here, she'd think of something that we need to remind members of. The monthly meeting coming up, for example, I think that is on the 5th of August, and that will be Varsha. So
Oh, nice.
I'm horrible about, see, Kim, I mean, Kay, you should have been here. All right. I am going to stop it here, and thank you, everybody. And boom.